Ben, Ben, it's 1 o'clock straight up, so let's get started. So today's training is on podcasting, and I'd like to thank Patrick Cassio because he asked me if I could do a training on podcasting. And I'll be totally honest with you guys. Like a lot of you, I know what podcasting is. I know there's a lot of podcasts out there. I had no clue on how to do a podcast or anything. So today's training is an introduction to how you can build your business, your Collect Direct business, utilizing a podcast. So today I'm going to give you some tips, but really at the end of the day, if this is something that you want to build your business with, there's so much available to you on the internet to learn about podcasting. So let's go through this. So podcasting is rapidly growing. And I mean, there's a lot of people you'll see on the news, they talk about their podcast. Some of the newscasters have a podcast. I think the Kelsey brothers have really made podcasting come to the forefront a lot in sports. So it's really rapidly growing. And because everybody's on their smartphones, a lot of the podcasting, you can just log on with your smartphone. A lot of people are watching podcasts from work when they're not supposed to be. So that's why the audience is really growing worldwide. And it's really a lot of businesses are using it. So when we talk about how you're going to build your business, and we've talked about this with the generational marketing, with the online forums, and now podcasting. I can't stress enough how you really need to dig in and put a plan together on how you want to work your Collect Direct business. And it was interesting because I knew nothing about podcasting. And when Patrick asked if I could do a training on this, I'm like, all right, let me delve into it. And it took a couple of days just researching and looking what's out there to really understand that this is really growing. And I understand why it's growing now because it's pretty easy to do. And I'll show you some tips as we go forward. So what's really important is planning your podcast. Now, here's what's interesting. All of the stuff I'm showing you is readily available on the internet. And I'll show you a couple of different podcast platforms you can use. But what's even more important is if you just Google, and I tell you, I Google everything. So like this podcast planner, I Googled podcast planner and it came up. So when you're planning your podcast, you have to choose your niche or what your topic is. And with the collectibles that we have, there's a variety of different topics that you can look at. And you really need to have an expertise in one of them. It's what we talked about with our generational marketing, right? You don't want to just go on every single platform and try and target every single generation. It doesn't work like that. So I believe after all the research I've done that you really need to be thoughtful. And I use that word a lot in these trainings, that you really need to be thoughtful in how you're going to do this, how you're going to do all of your marketing. And if podcasting is one of them, this is something you really need to look through. And you have to define your target audience. Just like the generational marketing, where you're laser focused on the generation that you're going after, when you're doing your research, you really need to define, because you want to make sure that you hit their interest and also their pain points. So if you're going to talk about home-based business, you need to look at what the pain points are for that and how you can melt the collectibles business into that home-based business strategy. You also need to plan your episodes and your content. Go back to the content planner that I showed you on Canva. So if you remember that, this is no different. And when you look to the right and you see that podcast planner, introduction, topic 1, topic 2, your script, your recording checklist, everything is there that you really need to follow. So if you choose to go into podcasting, this is going to be really easy for you just to follow what you can find. So what I thought I would do is I would give you an example using comic books. And we used comic books the last time when we talked about the forum. So the niche is comic books. You want to define the audience, which is comic book collectors. And maybe a name you would use is Comic Book Collectibles Unmasked. a podcast for collectors. Okay, because you're zeroing in and that's who your audience is. And then you want to plan your episodes and your content. So one of the things you could do is you could go back to the magazine that we did and the subject matter of the comic books, right, with the different eras. So you want to be able to, on your podcast, if you're doing comic books, to start, maybe your first episode starts at the very beginning with the first era. And then you can make that episode discuss everything about that era of comic books. So we're giving you all the tools that you really need, and hopefully this training will help you understand if podcasting is in your future. The next is, how do you structure your podcast? Again, if you look on that example on the right, I Googled it, and that shows you an example of it. So you need to plan your episode length. So you've got to be consistent. So let's just say you're going to have a 30-minute podcast. You have to make sure that each of your podcasts is the same 30 minutes. You need to decide on your format. You have to decide the structure and whether you want to be by yourself, if you want to bring a collaborator on, maybe you just want to tell a story. But you have to make sure that your format is engaging so that people are going to want to tune in every week. And remember, it's one topic per episode. You don't want to go crazy and start talking about a lot of different things. And if we go back to the way that the article was in the magazine on the comic books, each era, there's plenty of content there for you to build an episode on. And then you want a call to action. So what do you want your listeners to do? Do you want them to engage? Do you want them to comment? Do you want them to subscribe? Maybe if you have the ability to have one of the platforms that you're using, they can subscribe. Do you want to ask questions? How do you want them to get involved? That's your call to action. And then you need to summarize. At the end of your podcast, you need to summarize what you just talked about, right? It's like any type of a sales call that you have. You want to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them, right? And that's the summarization. And that's where you can also say, hey, guys, so just to review what we talked about today, go through it and say, if you want to know more information, please click below and subscribe to my podcast. So think about that, because you're not going to take the time to put all this together. So you have to make sure that people are going to engage and that you're going to give them content. Now let's talk about tips for recording high quality audio. So microphone placement. It's so important. Even when we do these Zooms, it's important that you have a good mic and that the placement is good. Room acoustics. If you're going to seriously do podcasting, make sure that your room is set up so that you have the best acoustics available. And you want to minimize the background noise. So if you have dogs or cats, they're always climbing around your desk, make sure that there's nothing that's going to obstruct the background noise. Unless, of course, you're doing a podcast on animals and then it doesn't matter. But in your collectibles business, maybe you're going to want to position some of your collections behind you. You want to make sure that everything is set up so that you have the greatest success. Techniques for editing podcasts. Okay, this is where a lot of people are going to get really, really nervous, but there's everything available for you that make it so much easier. So trimming and arranging your audio clips. That sounds pretty daunting, right? But with the programs that are out there that I'm going to share with you, all of this is readily available. The trimming, arranging the audio clips. You want to add music and sound effects. Just think about the comic books again. Just think about how cool you could have some of the special effects or the music that deals directly with the comic books that you're showing. Balancing audio levels. Again, sounds pretty daunting to me, but when I looked at what's available, super easy. Again, podcasting is so critical right now for people that are building their businesses through podcasting, that there's platforms out there that make it super simple. Hosting and distribution. Okay, so now what do you do, right? So the importance of hosting and distribution is You have to understand what that means, right? So hosting just refers to the process of your podcast files. So you're going to host it, but then you have to distribute. And I'll share with you some different avenues that you can look at that. Again, hosting is one thing, distribution is totally different. Storing your podcast on a server. The importance of this is that you want listeners all over the world to be able to have access to your podcast. So you could do a podcast live, like say you every Saturday at 2:00 in the afternoon, you do a podcast. Well, you want to put that on a server because maybe somebody in, I don't know, Sydney, Australia wants to listen to you, and they're not going to get up and listen to you in the middle of the night their time. So you want to make sure that you're storing all of these podcasts on a server. Again, there are platforms out there. It's like a one-stop shop. Because when you're on that server, remember, you're making your episodes accessible to listeners. So you're memorializing everything. Just like when we record these Zooms and we post the Zooms, it's there for any time that somebody wants to log in and listen to the Zoom today, they can do that. It's the same thing with the podcast. And you want to make sure that you're utilizing different platforms, right? So it's not just, and I'm not going to go into, there's so many different platforms right now, but you may want to put your podcast on more than one platform to make it easily accessible for people. Examples of platforms. Now, here's the thing that's really interesting, and I found it through Googling. So there are 3 top ones that I found was Buzzsprout, Libsyn, and Podbean. Now, all 3 of these have great systems set up from the beginning to showing you everything. I think it was Buzzsprout that you could join for free. And some of them give you like 2 hours for $7 a month. It's very reasonable, but not only is it a reasonable service, it teaches you everything that you need to know. So all the heavy lifting that I did to get ready for this podcast presentation, when I went to these 3 different ones, and I Googled what are the top ones, and then I researched each one of them, and I thought, man, this makes it super easy for somebody. So Patrick, when you asked me to do a training on podcasting, it's something so simple that if any of you pick one of these, you can go on to their websites and you can learn what they have available to you. And they make it easy. The trimming, everything that you need, not the acoustics, but if you want to record something and then you want to add the music to it, these 3, along with multiples of other companies out there that have this available, make podcasting so simple for you. So any 3 of these I would recommend based on everything that I read about them. So what are the steps to follow? You have to choose a podcast hosting platform. Again, all I did was Google podcast platforms, and there was a list of 10. I picked the top 3. But you have to look at what's your budget. And then you might want to start small. Like there was one that was free to start, and then I think it was $7 for 2 hours a month, and then it was 4 hours. So that's when I said you have to plan. Do you want to do 30 minutes? So if you want to do 1 30-minute a week, you need 2 hours. And that's a pretty good starting point, I would think. And then you have to sign up and create an account. So again, whatever you choose, it's very easy to sign up and join. And I would join, for me, I would always join the free service first, just to play around with all the tools that they have to make sure that I'm comfortable with it. And then you want to upload your podcast episodes. So this is where you go back to that sheet that you plan everything. And again, when we look at planning, everything I've done on the training side of your social media and how you're going to build your business is you really need to put a plan in place. And then you have to follow the plan. It's just like in network marketing, we have our daily method of operation, right? Our DMO. This is the same thing. Your marketing is your DMO. How are you going to market Collect Direct? How are you going to build your business? Now, some of you love going to trade shows. Some of you are going to do your own little trade shows. Some of you are going to concentrate on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. Some of you are going to do the online forums. This podcasting is really pretty cool because it's something that people can listen to right now live, or they can join whenever they want to. So you're going to upload your podcast, and then you're going to create a podcast feed. And this is really on your hosting platform. It will give you all of this. It will give you the titles and descriptions. So this is what's really important. Again, I'm just giving you a broad overview, but when you dig into this and you do your own research, again, you'll see how easy this can become. And then you want to submit your podcast to directories. This is like the Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You've all heard Spotify, Google Podcasts. There's another one called Stitcher. This is when you put your podcast on multiple directories. And that's really where you're going to get the most people listening, is when you use multiple directories. And you want to promote your podcast. So how do you promote your podcast? Again, you're going to look at social media. You're going to look at, if you have an email list, if you're building your business with email list, you want to send this out. And you want to encourage your friends, your family, anybody that you know, or maybe if you've gone out and you've handed out those postcards, right? And people are following up with you, make sure you keep a list of every contact that you have, so that when you start your podcast, you can say, hey, I now have a podcast about my collectibles business. And you can give them the information. And it's just like we always talk about in network marketing, when you're going to have an opportunity meeting, we always said, make sure that you have an opportunity meeting same time every week. So Wednesday night at 7, we're going to meet at Dawn's house for an opportunity meeting. And then you always know that every Wednesday night at 7, Dawn is going to have anybody that you want to bring in, any guest, any prospects. It's the same thing with your podcast. You want to make sure that your podcast is the same time every week. So if it's Saturdays at noon, it's Saturday at noon. That's when you're live. And you want to monitor your performance and your analytics. You know, we've talked about analytics in all the social media that we've done, because this gives you your metrics. It lets you know if what you're doing is engaging with the audience. Because if you don't have audience participation and engagement, then your podcasts are going nowhere. So if you're monitoring your performance and your analytics, you'll know what's working and what's not working. So again, just like everything we've ever taught you, it's all about analytics. Strategies for promoting podcasts. Okay, social media, we just talked about it, right? So let's just say that you're targeting Facebook for your generational marketing. And now you're going to go out there and you're going to tell them that you have your weekly podcast. I would make sure if you're using the Canva planner, I would make sure that you let them know at least 48 hours before. You tell them what the subject matter is, if you're going to have a guest. And this is where we talk about collaborations, which is amazing, because a lot of people, they love the podcast that there's more than one person. So let's just say you're going to do something on comic books, and you research and there's somebody out there that you really like to interview. So you would put that out to everybody on your social media, all your friends, your email. Hey, this Saturday at 12, don't miss my podcast with so-and-so, who's an expert in the comic book industry, or if they're one era specific that you're going to talk about. Remember, because it's per episode. So if you're collaborating, make sure that that collaboration fits into your overall plan that you're doing. Email marketing. This is something that we've not really broached on yet with the training, but your list is your list, right? So let's just say you're basing everything on Facebook. If Facebook goes down, you're screwed. You can't reach anybody. But if you're gathering people's emails, you own that email. So I can't stress enough the importance of getting people's emails that you're prospecting. All right, because you want to send out to your email list and come up with a really cool name for your podcast and really cool graphics. If you need help, that canva.com is amazing for helping you with graphics. And paid advertising. So you're going to want to consider paid advertising. But again, if you're going to start paying for advertising, you better make sure that everything is well planned out. And I would practice. If I'm going to pay for people to see my ads promoting my podcasting, I'm going to make sure I'm polished, that I know what I'm doing, that I have the sound engineering all set up. And again, the platforms that I shared with you and the stuff that you're going to find when you Google is going to make everything so easy for you to do. Optimization tips. Okay, SEO friendly titles and description. What this means is, so it's just like hashtags. You want to make sure that whatever your title is, people are going to be able to find it through search engine optimization. You don't want to just come up with a name that doesn't resonate with anybody. So if it's comic books, you want to make sure, and I would research. Again, everything I do is through Google. Everything is at your fingertips. So it makes your titles and your descriptions easy to do because you want to make sure that you're using relevant keywords. People are going to be searching and they're going to be searching for podcasts. You need to make sure that you're SEO friendly in your titles and your descriptions. Also your transcripts and your show notes. So this is for each episode, you're going to be able to enhance your SEO through your search engine by your transcript. So you're going to write out everything, just like I showed you on that planner. So you're going to come up with a topic, and then you're going to write out, if like say there's 4 sections, you're going to highlight those sections, but you really want to make sure that you search engine optimize those titles. Okay, so each section is going to have a title. You're going to make sure it's SEO. And then you're going to make sure that your transcripts are searchable and indexable through search engines. Again, that seems daunting, but when you go to the platforms, it shows you how to do all of this. It takes the guesswork out of it. Consistent branding and messaging. Everything we talked about in social media was being consistent. So whatever you're going to call your podcast is really what you're going to be known as, right? So whether you want to streamline it to one form of collectibles, whether it's toys or sports cards or sports memorabilia or comic books, you want to make sure that you're consistent so that people know that every Saturday at 2:00, you're going to get on your podcast and you're going to give them a wealth of information on comic books, for example. So you want to make sure your branding and your messaging is consistent. Engaging with your audience. You've got to build a strong connection. Just like with social media, when you're going for generational marketing, this means that you're engaging with listeners that are going to build a relationship with you, that between you and your audience, they're going to know that they can come to your podcast to learn about whatever you're specializing in. You want to encourage interaction. So maybe you want to have a feedback or listener retention. You want to make sure that you're encouraging them. And remember, when they interact with you, you have to make sure that you interact with them. And you want to gather feedback. You want to actively engage with your audience because you want their feedback. If they're talking back to you about what you've just discussed on your podcast, it's resonating with them. And if you're trying to sell collectibles or build a business, the best way for you to do it is to build trust. And what better way building trust than through your podcast? Let's talk about strategies for building that community. So, responding to comments and feedback. So we talked about this in social media. If somebody's going to engage with you and they're going to comment on a post, you better respond to them, because if you don't, you've just lost them. It's the same thing with podcasting. If somebody sends you a message, you want to take the time to respond to them. You can host a Q&A session. Think about that. Think about maybe each podcast that you do, you set it up for the last 5 minutes, you have a Q&A. Let me just give you a bit of a caveat, which is a warning on that one. You better know your subject matter, because you don't want somebody to ask you a question and they stump you. You're the expert. You're the person that's doing the podcasting to share your knowledge with the world. So make sure that you know what you're talking about. And exclusive content. Okay, one of the things you don't want to do is take somebody else's content. You want to make sure that you're writing your own content. Sure, you can Google it, you can go to AI, you can look for different avenues to help you to support what you're doing, but it has to be your own. It's just like anything else. You don't want to plagiarize on a podcast. So whether it's a 15-minute or a 30-minute podcast, it's got to be all original. And you want this community interaction. You want to create opportunities for listeners to connect with you through forums. And here we can go to an online forum. So maybe you want to take your podcast and your online forum. And maybe those are the two ways that you're going to build your business. So forget about the social media as far as, just concentrating on Facebook or Instagram. Let's look at using online forums, podcasting, and maybe using social media to promote your podcast. When I look at the different podcasts that I'm seeing every day, it's either on the news, it pops up on my phone, it's on Facebook. Think about where your audience hangs out. Same thing we did with the generational marketing. Where does your audience hang out? Because that's where you want to hit them up. That's where you want to go to create the engagement with them. And whether it's, discussion groups, social media, however you want to do it, you want to make sure that you're getting that interaction. So that concludes today's training on podcasting. So I really hope that you all enjoyed it. It's something that's, again, I knew nothing about. So when Patrick Cassio said, "Hey, Terry, can you do a training on podcasting?" I'm like, sure. I did the same thing that any of you would do. I went to Google and I started researching. And then the three platforms that I gave you, I went to each one of those platforms and I clicked on the services and the cost. And it made it so easy. I thought, I could do this. I could do podcasting without any problem because these services make it easy for you. You pay them a fee, or the one started with, it was free. I think it was the first 7 days. And then it was $7 a month. Right? So you're going to ease into this and you're going to start with just the people that you know. So I was thinking about collaboration. Oh my God. And I've talked to you guys about this. You have a community. I look at the posts that you put on Facebook. I look at Jackie and Deborah and Riel and Dawn and everybody, what you're posting. Why not get together and collaborate on a podcast? Let's just say a couple of you love the comic books. And the only reason I'm using comic books all the time is because, like I've shared with you, when I wrote that magazine and I started doing the research on comic books, I had no idea. Like I had no idea there was eras. And Dennis still kids me about that because I'm like, oh my God, did you know that there were all these eras in comic books? I was clueless. So people that are engaged in comic books, they know that stuff, right? So that's when I tell you, if you're going to do a Q&A, make sure you know the content because it's super important. But podcasting, I'm telling you, it's pretty interesting. And with the group that we have here and the people that are just talking amongst themselves, why not collaborate? Why not, hey, if you're going to do something, invite Dave, right? Look at all the marketing that's being done on social media. What if you could invite the GOAT to your podcast? How cool would that be, right? So that's just something I want you guys to think about. So I'm glad you all joined me today. This is going to be posted on Facebook. It's a lot of information. So Ben, we have 5 winners today. So I think Ben has posted them. Cam Callender, Shane Rogers. Oh, let me go to the chat. Shane Rogers, Chuck Conway, Marinda Garrett, and Constant Peve. Is it Peve? P-E-V, Peve? So those are our 5 winners today. So all of you, please make sure that you send support at Collect Direct, your information. And if you have any ideas for training, let me know. Please, post it on that Facebook group because I love training you guys. I love giving you ideas and different ways that you can build your business. Because the one thing that's great about Collect Direct, there's nothing like it out there. We're brand new. We need to share everything. It's a category creator. And it's the only place that you can build a business with collectibles. So I hope you enjoyed today's training. I enjoyed doing the research and I enjoyed talking to all of you. So enjoy your Saturday or your Sunday, wherever you are in the world. And thanks for joining, everybody. Take care.